My stepdaughter found me, wedding seating chart in hand, her expression one of utter entitlement. Lee, the head table is for my real dad. He's family, after all. You're my stepdad, so you could just sit at one of the tables in the back. It's better that way, so things aren't awkward for everyone. I had raised her for 20 years. I put her through college. I'd even bought the condo that was meant to be her wedding gift. Her so-called real dad, on the other hand, had given her nothing but a genetic code. In 20 years, he hadn't paid a single dollar in child support. I nodded, a calm, gentle smile spreading across my face. Okay, that makes sense. She laughed, satisfied. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer. That condo I was about to sign over to her. Stop the closing. Kill the deal completely. 01, Chloe dropped the printed seating chart onto the coffee table in front of me, tapping her finger on the section marked head table. The gesture had a casual, dismissive air, as if she were informing me of a decision already made, not having a discussion. Lee, look, she said, her voice bright. The head table is for our most important family members. I haven't seen my real dad in 20 years, and now that he's back, he obviously needs to be sitting there. She wasn't looking at me as she spoke, her gaze drifting out the window as if my reaction was a foregone conclusion, utterly irrelevant. I followed her finger. The head table had 10 seats. They were for her mother, Sharon, her fiancé, Kevin, and Kevin's parents, and a few other names I didn't recognize, relatives from her biological father's side, I presumed. And there, right in the middle, in bold type, was his name, Rick Davis. My name, Lee Coleman, was assigned to table 12, a spot tucked in a corner near the ballroom's exit, next to a note that read, Family Friend. Friend. Such a polite, distant word. 20 years of devotion, 20 years of sacrifice, all boiled down to that single, empty word. I didn't feel anger. Not a bit. My heart felt like it had been submerged in a bucket of ice water, leaving only a profound, numb cold. She called me Lee, not Dad. She said he was family. What did that make me? A roommate? A walking, talking ATM? I looked up at the young woman I had raised since she was a little girl. She stood there in her designer dress, her makeup perfect, her eyes filled with a sense of vanity and entitlement that felt completely alien to me. She was no longer the shy 4-year-old who used to hide behind Sharon's legs, peeking out at me with timid curiosity. I smiled. The muscles in my face felt stiff, but I managed to pull them into a gentle curve. Okay, I said, my voice perfectly level, betraying no emotion. That makes sense. My compliance seemed to please her. She finally met my eyes, a flicker of approval in her gaze, as if to say, good, you know your place. Great, so that's settled. You're being so mature about this, Lee. Anyway, I've got to run. So much wedding stuff to do. She snatched up the paper and walked away, humming a pop song, her steps light and carefree, as if she'd just solved a minor logistical issue. The living room fell silent. The cloying scent of her expensive perfume hung in the air, sweet enough to make my stomach turn. I sat motionless on the sofa, holding that gentle smile until my face began to ache. Slowly, I reached for my phone. The cool metal felt like a block of ice against my palm, the chill seeping deep into my bones. I scrolled through my contacts, found a number 4 David Chun, ESQ, and hit dial. He picked up on the second ring. Lee, hello. David, that condo I hired you to handle. The one I'm gifting to my stepdaughter, Chloe. I want you to stop everything. Right now. Immediately. My voice was so steady it surprised me. David paused on the other end. Are you sure, Lee? All the paperwork is ready to go. We're just waiting on your final signature at the closing. If we pull out now, restarting the process will be a major headache. I'm sure. The words came out sharp, definitive. Stop all proceedings. And don't move forward with anything unless you get my direct, personal authorization. Understood, Lee. I'll take care of it right away. After hanging up, I tossed the phone onto the sofa with a dull thud. I leaned back and closed my eyes, but my mind was flooded with a memory from 20 years ago. I was not yet 30 when a friend introduced me to Sharon, a single mother with a 4-year-old daughter. The first time I saw Chloe, she was a tiny, skinny thing in worn, ill-fitting clothes. She hid behind Sharon, peering out at me with wide, dark eyes, a mix of fear and curiosity in her gaze as she studied the stranger in her house. She's shy, Sharon had said. I knelt, pulled a Hershey's Kiss from my pocket, and held it out to her. She hesitated for a long moment before her small, grubby hand shot out, snatched the candy, and retreated back behind her mother's leg. A few minutes later, I heard a voice no louder than a mouse's whisper. "Thank you, mister." That simple phrase melted my heart. To earn her trust, I quit smoking. I stopped drinking with my buddies. I gave every paycheck to Sharon and poured all my energy into that little girl's life. When she had a fever in the middle of the night, I carried her on my back and ran 2 miles to the emergency room. When she wanted to learn piano, I gritted my teeth and bought a used upright on an installment plan I couldn't afford. When she went to college, I spent the summer working a second job on a construction site under the blazing sun, just to cover her tuition and living expenses. I thought that kindness could soften any heart. I thought that after 20 years, even a stone would have been warmed by my devotion. But reality had just slapped me across the face. I opened my eyes and stared at the empty living room. This home, the one I had built with my own sweat and sacrifice, suddenly felt cold and unfamiliar. My hands slowly tightened into fists, my nails digging into my palms, the sharp pain a welcome distraction. The last trace of warmth in my eyes finally died out. All that was left was a quiet, chilling resolve. 02 Sharon came home around 7, bubbling with excitement. "Lee, you should have seen it. We went for her final wedding dress fitting today. Chloe looked absolutely gorgeous, like a princess." She chattered on as she kicked off her shoes, completely oblivious to my unusual silence. I sat at the dining room table, where a dinner of roast chicken, potatoes, and green beans was slowly growing cold. I hadn't touched my plate. "Oh, and Kevin's mother wants to have dinner with us tomorrow to go over the final details. By the way, Chloe showed you the seating chart, right?" She finally sat down across from me and picked up her fork. That girl can be so scatterbrained sometimes. But her father, well, they haven't seen each other in 20 years. He's a little insecure, wants to look good in front of his family. Putting him at the head table is understandable. You're a bigger man for not making a fuss about it. That was the right thing to do. She took a bite of chicken, her tone full of praise, as if my accepting this humiliation was some noble achievement. I didn't respond. I just picked up my fork and took a bite of the now-cold mashed potatoes. They were stiff and pasty, and I struggled to swallow. Sharon finally sensed the tension in the room. She put her fork down and looked at me. "What's wrong? Not hungry? Or are you actually upset about the seating chart?" Her brow furrowed with a hint of impatience. "No," I said flatly, keeping my eyes on my plate. "No." Her voice rose. "Your face is screaming, 'I'm pissed off,' and you're telling me no? Lee, we've been together for 2 decades. You think I don't know you?" She set her silverware down with a clatter, her expression shifting to one of weary condescension that stung my eyes. "I know you're not happy about it, but can't you just be the bigger person? It's not that Chloe is trying to be cruel. She just wants to make her real dad happy. He's had a rough go of it all these years. He's finally back. Can't we, as the adults here, just give him this one thing? His pride. Everyone's pride mattered but mine. Besides, it's just a seat. You're still eating at the same wedding, aren't you? Getting into a fight with a kid over something so petty. It's ridiculous. People will talk." She had begun her usual routine of smoothing things over, every word a soft blade twisting in my heart. I finally looked up and met her gaze directly. "Sharon." I rarely used her full name, and she flinched. "Let's imagine for a second that it was my biological son getting married today, and he told you that you had to sit in the corner because his real mother deserved the seat at the head table. How would you feel?" My voice was quiet, but each word hung in the air like a nail. Sharon's face flushed a deep red. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Of course. What could she say? That she'd be fine with it? A bald-faced lie. That she wouldn't stand for it? Then what right did she have to demand that I be the bigger person? After a few seconds of sputtering silence, her embarrassment curdled into anger. "What kind of question is that? It's not the same thing at all. You're just trying to pick a fight." She was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, all claws and fury. "Lee, I can't believe how petty you're being. Chloe is about to get married. This is supposed to be a happy time, and you're going to ruin it over something this small? What is wrong with you?" The accusations came flooding out. In her eyes, I was the one making a scene, the one disrupting the family's happiness. I looked at her face, twisted with indignation, and suddenly felt exhausted. What was the point in arguing with someone who, deep down, had never truly considered you one of her own? I put down my fork. I couldn't eat another bite. I stood up, said nothing, and turned toward the bedroom. Lee Coleman, what do you think you're doing? You get back here and talk to me. Sharon's shriek echoed behind me. I ignored it, walked into our room, and closed the door. Then I turned the lock. I could hear her pounding on the door, her muffled curses seeping through the wood, but I tuned it all out. It was the first time in our 20 years together that I had ever locked her out. And through that door, I could feel it with absolute certainty. The home I'd worked so hard to build was finally starting to crumble. 03, the smoke from last night's battle hadn't even cleared when an unfamiliar number called my phone the next morning. Hello, am I speaking with Mr. Lee Coleman? This is Kate from Aspen Realty. I'm calling about the condo for Ms. Chloe Davis. We just received a notice from your attorney that you've suspended the transfer of title. Is there a problem? The agent's voice was laced with anxiety. A hefty commission was on the line. Before I could answer, a scream erupted from the living room. What? What did you say? Chloe, who I hadn't realized was awake, was standing there holding a glass of milk, having clearly overheard the call. I spoke calmly into the phone. That's correct. Just follow the attorney's instructions. I hung up. Chloe stormed over, slamming her glass on the coffee table so hard that milk sloshed over the sides. Lee Coleman, what the hell is this? Are you trying to blackmail me with the condo? She used my full name, her eyes blazing with a contemptuous fury, as if I'd committed some unforgivable crime. I picked up a napkin and slowly wiped the droplets of milk from the back of my hand. This isn't blackmail. My voice was still quiet. That condo was my wedding gift to you. But since the man giving the gift isn't even worthy of a seat at the head table, then I see no reason to give such an expensive gift at all. Chloe was trembling with rage. She had probably never imagined that I, the man who had always given her everything she wanted, would ever speak to her with such firmness. Her face turned beet red as her anger boiled over into a torrent of vicious accusations. You're a hypocrite, a cheap, petty old man. I knew you were up to something. All those years of being nice to me, it was just so I'd be your retirement plan, wasn't it? Now that I'm getting married and starting my own life, you're showing your true colors. I see right through you. Her hateful words rained down on me like shards of ice. My retirement plan? I was 48 years old and in perfect health. Did I really need a spoiled 24-year-old to take care of me? What a joke. The shouting drew Sharon out of the bedroom. Seeing the tense standoff, she didn't even bother to ask what was wrong. She immediately took her daughter's side. Lee, have you lost your mind? What are you doing? Chloe is getting married. If you take the condo back now, you'll make us the laughingstock of the whole town. Do you want her to be humiliated in front of her new in-laws? As she spoke, Sharon's eyes welled up, and she deployed her most trusted weapon, tears. My life is so hard. I gave you 20 years, and this is how you treat us? You're going to ruin this wedding and destroy our family's reputation. As soon as Sharon started crying, Chloe joined in. The two of them stood there, a mother-daughter chorus of victimhood, painting me as the villain who was tearing their lives apart. I looked at the two weeping women before me and felt a weariness that went bone deep. This wasn't my home anymore. I was just an outsider, a provider of shelter and money who didn't deserve a name or an ounce of dignity. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I walked silently to the balcony, reached into a dusty corner, and pulled out a pack of cigarettes I'd forgotten about years ago. The tobacco was stale. It took me a few tries to get one lit. I took a deep drag. The harsh smoke made me cough, but the familiar numbing sensation was a small relief to my frayed nerves. Through the haze of smoke, I watched the mother and daughter sobbing in each other's arms in the living room. They were a family bound by blood, and I was and always would be on the outside looking in. Chloe wiped her tears, her red-rimmed eyes fixing on me with defiance. I don't need your stupid condo. I'll have a beautiful wedding without it. My dad said he'll get me something even better. Don't come crawling back to me when you realize what you've lost. I took another drag from my cigarette and said nothing. Regret? My only regret was not seeing the truth of it all much sooner. 04 Chloe's real dad, Rick Davis, made his grand entrance the next afternoon. A gleaming black Mercedes pulled up to our apartment building. A man in a sharp suit and gold-rimmed glasses stepped out. That was him. 20 years had etched lines on his face, but they were lines of slick, practiced charm, not wisdom. Sharon and Chloe were already waiting downstairs. Their eyes lit up at the sight of the luxury car. "Chloe, look how successful your father is," Sharon whispered excitedly, squeezing her daughter's arm. Rick retrieved 2 expensive-looking gift boxes from the trunk, handing one to each of them. "Sharon, you've worked so hard all these years. This is for you. And Chloe, my sweet girl, Daddy is so sorry. This is a little something to make up for lost time." Sharon opened her box to reveal a glittering gold necklace. Chloe's contained the latest designer handbag. The two of them were completely dazzled by the lavish gifts. All their previous resentments melted away, replaced by pure joy and admiration. That evening, Sharon cooked an elaborate meal to welcome Rick back. At the dinner table, I was the odd man out. The three of them chattered away, a happy, reunited family. Rick spun tales of his booming business ventures down south, the money he'd made, the important people he knew. His stories were grandiose and embellished, but Sharon and Chloe were mesmerized, their eyes shining with awe. "Dad, you're amazing," Chloe gushed. "Oh, this is nothing," Rick said with a wave of his hand, a master of false modesty. "Just small-time stuff. The real reason I came back was for my baby girl's wedding. I won't let anyone or anything spoil her big day." I sat in silence, watching the performance. I noticed the frayed stitching on the cuff of his supposedly high-end suit, a clear knockoff. The second hand on his flashy gold Rolex ticked instead of sweeping, a cheap imitation you could buy on any street corner. And a Mercedes parked downstairs still had a small Hertz sticker in the corner of the windshield. He was a fraud from head to toe, but he had this mother and daughter, blinded by their own vanity, wrapped around his little finger. After a few glasses of wine, Rick casually brought up the main topic. "By the way, Chloe, your mom mentioned that your uncle, Ali, was getting you a condo for the wedding." His tone was light, but his eyes were sharp. Before I could say a word, Chloe seized the opportunity to vent, embellishing the story for dramatic effect. "Dad, you have no idea how awful he's been. Just because I didn't put him at the head table, he took the condo back. He can't stand to see me happy. He's jealous that we're a real family again." She started dabbing at her eyes, her voice thick with self-pity. Rick flew into a manufactured rage, slamming his hand on the table so hard the dishes rattled. "How dare he? Who does he think he is, treating my daughter like that?" He turned to Chloe, his face a mask of righteous fury, and thumped his chest. "Don't you worry, sweetheart. We don't need anything from a man like that. A condo? Is that all? Daddy will buy you one. A brand new one. Bigger and better than anything he could ever afford." This grand declaration was the final straw. Sharon and Chloe were completely won over. "Oh, Rick, you're wonderful. Dad, you're the best dad in the world." Tears of gratitude streamed down their faces. Rick was their hero, their savior. I sat across from them, watching this tragic, farcical family drama unfold, a cold smile playing on my lips. The real show was about to begin, and I couldn't wait to see how this best dad in the world was going to handle the final act. 05. Rick threw himself into the role of hero with gusto. The next day, he appointed himself father of the bride and chief wedding planner, and immediately started making changes. He scanned the menu provided by the hotel and frowned. "This is unacceptable. We can't serve this to our guests. My friends are very influential people." With a flourish, he crossed off several dishes and replaced them with lobster, filet mignon, and other expensive options. "And the bar? What is this house wine? We need Macallan, top shelf everything." The hotel manager, smiling nervously, punched the numbers into a calculator. He turned to Sharon. "Ma'am, with these changes, the new total for the reception will be an additional $8,000. $8,000. Sharon's smile faltered for a second. Rick, however, was unfazed. He patted her shoulder reassuringly. "Sharon, this is for our daughter's big day. It's about her reputation. Just tell Lee to cover it." Sharon looked conflicted, but the appeal to her daughter's reputation worked. That night, she brought it up with me, her voice hesitant. "Lee, you know, Chloe only gets married once. We want it to be a beautiful event, so she can hold her head high with her new family. That $8,000, could you just..." I cut her off. I will cover the costs we originally budgeted for. My tone was flat, non-negotiable. Anything extra is on the person who ordered it. Sharon's face fell. Word of my refusal, of course, got back to Rick and Chloe. The next day, the three of them cornered me in the living room. This time, Rick dropped all pretense of civility. He pointed a finger at me, his face dripping with disdain. You know what, Lee? I figured you out. You're a small man with no class. You raised a daughter for 20 years just hoping for a payout, didn't you? Now that she's marrying well, you can't stand it. Chloe chimed in, her voice sharp and cruel. He's right. My dad is more successful and generous than you'll ever be, and you're jealous. You're just scared that now that he's back, everyone will see how useless you really are. Useless. The word struck me like a poison dart. I looked at the two people hurling insults at me, then at Sharon, who stood by in silent agreement. For the first time, a hot surge of anger broke through the ice in my veins. I didn't fight back. I didn't argue. I turned, went to the bedroom, and took two things from my desk drawer, my debit card and a thick, worn bank ledger I'd kept for 20 years. I walked back into the living room and slapped them down on the coffee table. This card is for the account where my paycheck is deposited. The pin is Chloe's birthday. For 20 years, every payday, I've kept $100 for gas and incidentals. The rest was transferred directly into this account, which Sharon managed. This ledger, I said, tapping the book, is a record of every dollar I earned from side jobs, landscaping, construction, weekend gigs. I saved $52,000. $40,000 of that paid for Chloe's 4 years of college. The other $12,000 I was saving to give to her as a wedding gift. It's all here. Every deposit, every withdrawal. The bank has the statements to prove it. If you want to know what I've spent on this family, on Chloe, it's all here down to the penny. My voice was even, but the room was deathly quiet. The arrogant sneer on Rick's face vanished, replaced by a deep, awkward flush. His eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine. Chloe's face went from red to white, her lips trembling. Sharon stared at the floor, wringing her hands, unable to look at me. It's not about $8,000. I can afford it. I picked up the ledger and spoke each word with chilling clarity. But my money is for my family. And as for people who only know how to take, who can't even offer a shred of basic human respect. I let out a short, cold laugh. I didn't need to finish the sentence. Rick's face was a mask of humiliation. He cleared his throat and scrambled for an excuse. Well, it's a nice day. Chloe, why don't you come take a walk with your old man? With that, he practically fled the apartment. It was the first time I had ever wielded my financial contribution as a weapon. I needed them to understand, with absolute clarity, exactly who had been holding up the roof of the house they so casually disdained. 06, with the wedding just 2 days away, the tension in our home was suffocating. Sharon and Chloe no longer yelled at me, but the cold, silent distance they kept was more chilling than any argument. That afternoon, I came home from work early. As I reached the front door, I heard Rick's voice from inside, low and thick with emotion, on the verge of tears. Sharon, I failed you. I failed our daughter. I paused, my hand on the doorknob, and listened. I was going to buy Chloe a new condo. I had the down payment all ready to go, and then my worthless business partner ran off with all the money. Now my business is about to go under. I need $20,000, Sharon, or I'll be ruined. Rick's voice was a pathetic, desperate whine. I could picture Sharon's expression, her heartstrings being expertly plucked. 20,000, that's so much. Her voice was hesitant. I'll have to talk to Lee. No, you can't tell him. Rick cut in, his voice urgent. This is business. If he finds out, he'll never let me live it down. He already looks down on me. Can you imagine him knowing I'm in trouble? Sharon, this is about my pride. It's about our future. The implication hung in the air. Chloe jumped in, her voice already tearful. Mom, he's my real dad. How can we not help him when he's in trouble? This is what family does. Are you just going to stand by and let him go to jail? Family, pride, a hint of future romance. It was a trifecta of manipulation. Sharon's fragile resolve didn't stand a chance. There was a long silence from inside. Then, I heard her voice, firm with a newfound sense of purpose. Okay, I'll give it to you. I have an account. It's the money Lee has given me over the years. There's 20,000 in it. You can take it. Sharon, you're a lifesaver. Rick's voice was instantly ecstatic. Don't worry, as soon as the wedding gifts come in, I'll pay you back every cent. I swear it. I'll make sure you and Chloe have the most beautiful wedding ever. I leaned against the cold wall in the hallway, listening to this final, pathetic act of betrayal. My heart was calm. That $20,000 was the nest egg I had set aside for her for our retirement. I'd never intended to touch it, and now she was about to throw it into a black hole. I didn't barge in. I didn't scream. There was no point. I turned and walked quietly back down the stairs, sitting on a bench in the small park across the street. A few minutes later, I saw Sharon walk Rick out of the building. They hugged, and the look of smug success on Rick's face was unmistakable. After he left, Sharon stood alone for a long time, her expression a mix of guilt and anxiety. I pulled out my phone and opened the app for the security camera I'd installed on our balcony. It had a clear view of the living room sofa. I watched as Sharon came back inside and sat down, phone in hand. Her hands were shaking as she navigated the banking app. Finally, she took a deep breath and hit the transfer confirmation button. I saw the expression that washed over her face. Relief, tinged with a flicker of hope for the future she imagined. I turned off my phone. The last embers of affection I had for this family, for this life, were extinguished in that moment. Rick, Sharon, and Chloe. They were family. I was just a chump who funded their reunion. I didn't go back to the apartment. I drove straight to my brother's house. I told him I thought I was getting a divorce. He listened to the whole story, his anger growing until he was slamming his fist on the table. But when he looked at my eerily calm face, his anger subsided into a heavy sigh. He just poured me a glass of whiskey. To hell with them, bro, he said. You're better off. I raised a glass and drank it in one go. The whiskey burned, but my heart was colder. What I didn't know then was that as soon as Rick got the money, he blocked the number of his fake business partner and immediately booked a one-way flight south for the next morning. In his phone, the contacts for Sharon and Chloe were saved as ATM 1 and ATM 2. 07 the wedding day was bright and sunny, the light almost painfully sharp. I didn't wear the new suit I'd bought for the occasion. Instead, I put on an old, dark jacket and took an Uber to the hotel by myself. The entrance was lavishly decorated. A huge poster of Chloe and Kevin, smiling blissfully, stood by the door. Sharon and Chloe were there to greet guests, dressed in expensive, custom-made gowns, looking like two proud peacocks. When they saw me, they gave me a curt nod, their eyes darting away nervously before plastering on smiles for the next arrivals. I walked past them and into the ballroom. The usher checked my name on her list, her expression a mix of pity and embarrassment. Mr. Coleman, your seat is at table 12. I looked where she was pointing. In the farthest, darkest corner of the room, near the swinging doors to the kitchen and the restrooms, sat a single, lonely table. The place card on it read, Friends of the bride's family. I walked over and took a seat. The others at the table were distant relatives I barely knew. They stared at me with open curiosity. Soon, Kevin and his parents arrived. Kevin's father, Robert Grant, was a poised, distinguished-looking man who ran a successful local construction company. They were shown to the head table. I saw Kevin's eyes scan the name cards, his brow furrowing when he saw the empty seat next to the card that read Rick Davis. His gaze swept the room and landed on me, in my corner. A look of discomfort crossed his face. He leaned over and whispered something to Chloe. Her expression immediately soured. He wanted to sit there, she muttered dismissively, said he'd be more comfortable. Kevin gave her a long, searching look, a flicker of disappointment in his eyes, but he didn't press the issue. I sat in my corner, pouring myself a glass of iced tea, ignoring the whispers that buzzed around me like flies. Is that Chloe's stepdad? The one who raised her? Yeah, the real dad shows up, and suddenly there's no room for him. It's pathetic. Sure, he'll hear you. I heard he gave him a huge amount of money for the wedding, though. What money? My cousin told me he took back the condo he was giving her. They had a massive fight about it. I listened, my face a blank mask, as if they were talking about a stranger. Finally, the music swelled. The wedding planner, headset on, walked onto the stage. And now, his cheerful voice boomed. Let's give a huge round of applause for our groom, Kevin, and let's get ready to welcome our beautiful bride, Chloe, escorted by her father. All the spotlights swung to the grand entrance at the back of the ballroom. But the doorway was empty, except for Chloe, standing alone in her white dress, her face a picture of hopeful anticipation. Down in front, the color drained from Sharon's face. She was frantically dialing Rick's number, over and over, but the call went straight to voicemail every time. 1 minute passed, then 2. The music played on a loop, but the atmosphere in the room shifted from excited to awkwardly silent. The smile on Chloe's face froze, then crumbled, replaced by confusion, then outright panic. 5 minutes past the scheduled start of the ceremony. It was official. Rick Davis, the best dad in the world, who had promised to give her the wedding of her dreams, was a no-show. 08, the wedding planner was sweating bullets on stage. In all his years, he'd never seen a fiasco like this. He had no choice but to awkwardly skip the father-daughter processional and ask the bride to walk down the aisle alone. Chloe moved like a robot, her face a mess of foundation and barely suppressed tears as she made the long, lonely walk. The guests were no longer whispering. They were talking openly. At the head table, the expressions on the Grant family's faces grew darker by the second. Robert Grant looked like he was ready to explode. He felt as if his family's name was being dragged through the mud. Sharon, near hysterics, told the planner to skip the father of the bride's speech as well. By now, even the most oblivious guest understood. The bride's biological father had bailed on her wedding day. Standing on the stage, Chloe looked like a clown under the hot lights, the target of 1,000 looks of pity and scorn. The humiliation was too much. The tears she'd been holding back finally broke free, streaming down her face. Just then, another bomb dropped. The hotel's event manager walked up to a distraught Sharon, holding a bill. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said politely. "Per your husband's upgrades to the menu and bar, there's an outstanding balance of $8,000. Would you like to settle that now?" Sharon stared at him blankly, the memory of Rick's promise crashing down on her. The man was gone. Where was the money supposed to come from? Her face went sheet white. The conversation was just loud enough for the head table to overhear. That was the final straw for Robert Grant. His face was no longer just angry. It was the face of a man who has been lied to, cheated, and utterly disrespected. He slammed his fork down on the table with a loud crack and stood up. The sound shattered Chloe's last ounce of composure. She crumpled to the stage, burying her face in her hands, her body shaking with convulsive sobs. The entire wedding had descended into a chaotic, three-ring circus. The murmurs of the guests, Sharon's frantic excuses, Chloe's wailing. It was a symphony of disaster. And through it all, I sat calmly in my corner. I took a slow sip of my iced tea. It was watery and bitter, but it was, without a doubt, the most satisfying drink I'd had in 20 years. I watched the chaos unfold, feeling neither joy nor pity. I was just a spectator who had paid the price of admission and was now watching the actors on stage receive their final, fitting curtain call. 09. Through the noise and confusion, a steady figure cut through the crowd and walked directly to my table. It was Robert Grant, Kevin's father. His face was still tight with anger, but when he looked at me, his eyes were clear. He even looked a little apologetic. He didn't blame me. He didn't complain. Instead, he said something to me, the forgotten stepfather that no one else had. "Mr. Coleman," he said, his voice firm and sincere. "I'm sorry you had to be a part of this mess." It was a simple sentence, but it was the first moment of genuine human decency I'd experienced all day. It felt like a warm current melting a tiny piece of the ice around my heart. I stood up slowly and gave him a slight nod in return. Robert sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. "The kids might not get it, but we're old enough to know what matters. We've seen how you've been there for Chloe all these years. My wife and I, we noticed. We appreciate it." His words silenced the few gossiping relatives at the tables nearby. "Mr. Coleman, if you would, please join us at the head table." He gestured toward the front of the room. I shook my head. "Thank you, Mr. Grant, but it doesn't matter anymore." At this point, a seat at that table meant nothing to me. I bent down and picked up the worn canvas bag I'd brought with me. From it, I pulled a thick notebook, its cover soft and frayed from years of handling. It was the ledger I had kept for 20 years. I held it in my palm. "Mr. Grant," I said, "I know your family is well off. A wedding gift more or less doesn't mean much. But there are some lessons that I think the kids and everyone else here need to learn today. My voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made him pause. Robert looked from the ledger in my hand to the resolve in my eyes and seemed to understand. He wordlessly stepped aside, clearing a path for me. I opened the ledger to the first page, where the ink was still dark and clear. Holding it, I began to walk, my steps steady and deliberate, toward the stage that was supposed to be a scene of celebration, but was now just a disaster zone. Sensing a new development, the lighting technician found me with a spotlight. In an instant, every eye in the room, every cell phone camera was fixed on me, the out-of-place stepfather in the old dark jacket. Sharon and Chloe stopped crying, staring at me in stunned silence. Their faces were a mixture of confusion and a dawning, nameless dread. 10. I walked onto the stage and took the microphone from the bewildered wedding planner's hand. A strange silence fell over the ballroom. Everyone held their breath, watching the unexpected guest. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. My voice was as calm and measured as if I were reading a quarterly report, devoid of all emotion. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lee Coleman, and I'm the bride's stepfather. I paused, then looked down at the open ledger in my hands. Today, I don't want to talk about feelings. I just want to share a list of expenses I've been keeping for the past 20 years. March 1998. Chloe, age 4. Pneumonia. Hospital bill, $320. We didn't have the money, so I borrowed it from our neighbor, Mrs. Gable. September 1999. Chloe starts elementary school. First semester tuition, $180. To pay for it, I sold the only thing I had left from my grandfather, his old watch. 2003. Chloe wanted to take art classes. $800 for the semester. For those 3 months, after my day job, I worked nights loading trucks down at the warehouse. I made $20 a night. I read on, entry by entry. Every piece of clothing, every birthday gift, every school fee, every tutor, every summer camp. Every item was recorded with the date, the purpose, and the cost. The ballroom was utterly silent, the only sound my steady voice echoing through the speakers. Sharon's face had gone from white to a sickly green. She was shaking uncontrollably. Chloe stood frozen, the blood draining from her face until she was as pale as her dress. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes on my ledger. 2012. Chloe gets into college out of state. Tuition, room, and board came to $20,000 a year. That summer was a hot one. I took a second job at a construction site, telling everyone I was working overtime. I hauled 50-pound bags of cement up 6 flights of stairs for $5 a bag. I made $8,000 that summer. I also lost 15 pounds. As I read that line, my voice trembled almost imperceptibly, but I quickly regained control. In the audience, Kevin's mother, an elegant woman, was quietly wiping tears from her eyes. Robert Grant's face was grim, his gaze fixed on me with an expression of profound respect. I turned to the last page. 2018 to present. Down payment on a condo for Chloe's wedding gift. $30,000, my entire life savings. The mortgage payment is $560 a month. I have made that payment every month for the last 4 years, for a total of $26,880. I finished the last entry. Then, with a crisp snap, I closed the ledger that held 20 years of my life. I lifted my head, my eyes locking onto Chloe, who looked like she was about to collapse. I looked directly at her, and for the first time, let my voice fill with the cold, hard weight of the truth. I spoke every word clearly and precisely. 20 years, thousands of days and nights. I raised you. I didn't ask you to think of me as your father. I just asked you to be a decent human being. This head table, I can't afford it. And this debt of gratitude, you can't afford to repay it. The words landed. The room was utterly, devastatingly silent. I placed the microphone and the heavy ledger gently on the floor of the stage. It felt like setting down a burden I had carried for 2 decades. I didn't look at anyone else. Not at Sharon, whose face was a mask of gray despair, and not at Chloe, who was staring into space, completely broken. I turned my back on them and walked off the stage. I headed for the exit, my shoulders straight. Behind me, the silence erupted into a roar of conversation. I heard none of it. I just wanted out of that suffocating room. As I reached the ballroom doors, Sharon scrambled after me, grabbing my leg and falling to her knees on the marble floor. Lee, I was wrong. Please forgive me. I was wrong. Tears and mascara streamed down her face, turning her into a grotesque caricature. She clung to my pants, refusing to let me go. I was a fool. I was an idiot to believe that liar Rick. Lee, please, just give me one more chance. We can go back to how things were. We're still a family. Her desperate cries drew the attention of the remaining guests. I didn't turn around. I didn't look down at her. I just stared out the glass doors at the bright, unforgiving sunlight. You weren't wrong, I said softly, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. You just never, not once, consider me your family. With that, I began to pry her fingers from my leg, slowly, deliberately. The force was final, absolute. I broke free and walked out of the hotel without a backward glance, flagging down a passing taxi. As the door closed, I heard Sharon's soul-shattering wail. In the rearview mirror, I saw her collapsed on the hotel steps like a discarded doll. In the distance, the Grant family was getting into their car, leaving the disastrous wedding behind. The guests were streaming out, their faces a mixture of disgust and pity as they looked back at Sharon and Chloe. The driver glanced at me in the mirror. Where to, pal? I watched the city streets blur past the window. After a long moment, I gave him an address. City Hall. I knew the clerk's office was closed on a Saturday. But in my heart, the divorce was already final. A week later, the divorce was processed with surprising speed. Sharon must have known there was no point in fighting. She didn't ask for a thing and walked away with nothing. Chloe's engagement, of course, was over. The Grant family not only called off the wedding, but had their lawyer send a letter demanding that Sharon and Chloe repay the $20,000 they had lost on venue deposits and other non-refundable expenses from the wedding fiasco. It was by a stroke of cosmic irony, the exact amount Sharon had given to Rick. Karma had a way of balancing the books. Forced to leave the home they had lived in for 20 years, they moved into a cramped, damp studio apartment in a rough part of town. To make ends meet, Sharon got a job as a cashier at a supermarket. Chloe, humbled, finally started looking for a real job, but her sense of entitlement and lack of skills meant she failed one interview after another. She called and texted me relentlessly. The messages started with curses, then shifted to accusations, and finally devolved into desperate pleas and apologies. I never replied. I blocked their numbers. 2 months later, I closed on the sale of the house that held so many bitter memories. One day, Sharon ran into an old neighbor at the grocery store. The neighbor looked at Sharon's haggard appearance and sighed. Sharon, you can't blame Lee for being cold. He sold the house a few weeks ago. I heard he got a pretty penny for it, over $100,000. Sharon's eyes went wide. The neighbor didn't notice, continuing her report. He used the money to book one of those round-the-world trips. Bought a new car, too. I saw him the other day. He looked 10 years younger, said he was finally going to see the world and live for himself for a change. Sharon walked back to her tiny, miserable apartment in a daze. Inside, Chloe was in the middle of a tantrum after another failed interview, having just smashed a cheap bowl of instant ramen against the wall. Looking at her furious, useless daughter and the squalor around them, Sharon finally broke. She slid to the floor, and the two of them wept together in their shared misery. It was only then, perhaps, that Chloe finally understood. What she had lost on her wedding day wasn't just a condo worth a small fortune or a marriage into a good family. She had lost the only father who had ever truly loved her, the only one who had ever been willing to sacrifice everything for her. And he was never coming back. 6 months later, on an island in the South Pacific, I leaned back in a beach chair, sunglasses on, feeling the warm breeze on my skin. Before me, the turquoise ocean stretched to the horizon, waves crashing gently on the white sand. I raised my bottle of beer toward the setting sun in a silent toast. A genuine smile spread across my face, a relaxed, carefree smile of a kind I hadn't known in 20 years. The second half of my life had begun, and it was all mine.